Hey Archie, that is a common misconception what you just said.
That says it all, I think. Welcome back to another episode of The Apex. I'm Archie, and today we're going to be chatting about synthetic fuels because my guest is Martin Popilka. Now, Martin is the CEO of P1 Fuels, which is a company leading the development of 100% fossil-free fuel. So they're the official fuel supplier for the World Rally Championship, and their work extends beyond motorsport and into the world of classic and everyday vehicles as well. Their mission is to change the fuel, not the car, which means we can enjoy the internal combustion engine long into the future in an environmentally friendly way. So without further ado, let's get into it. Martin, thank you so much for your time. How are you?
Thank you, Archie. I'm doing very well. Super excited to be here today with you to talk about what we've been working on.
Yeah, no, I'm excited too. I mean, I certainly hear a lot of rhetoric in the media around the environment, sustainability, but I don't know. There's a huge amount of noise being made about the development of these fuels, which is something I'm quite excited about. So keen to delve in and learn a bit more.
Absolutely.
So, I suppose to start with, I mean, what was it that drew you to sort of getting involved with P1 Fuels?
It's a good question. And, the true answer to that is I used to race cars. And so I'm going to come right out and right in the beginning. I'm a car guy, love cars. And honestly, I thought there has to be a more environmentally friendly way to enjoy the internal combustion engine. So I embarked on this journey of, actually, as you said in the intro, changing the fuel, not the car, because the fuel is the source of the CO2 emissions we need to avoid.
So I have to follow up then. If you're a racing guy, what were you racing? What's that?
Well, I was rallying. I wasn't definitely the best rally driver out there, but it was my passion, my life and hobby. So the last car I rallied was a Mitsubishi Lancer Evolution 6 Group N.
That is very cool. Well, I want to talk about the World Rally Championship a bit later, but that is, that's fantastic. That's very cool. And I suppose to clarify, I mentioned a little bit in my introduction, but what does P1 Fuels actually do, and what's the sort of overall aim?
Yeah. So look, we make fuel that's 100% fossil free, meaning it has no fossil components. And one of our USPs, or our main USP, is that the fuel works in any internal combustion engine without modification, which means, you have the potential to decarbonize all ICEs globally. So, and our aim is to bring these fuels to everyone without them even knowing that they run synthetic fuel, right? So that's the beauty of e-fuels or even biofuels, that you can actually put them into the current infrastructure without consumers ever noticing that they're running a 100% green fuel.
And so I'm no scientist, but could you give us a little bit of a breakdown of the manufacturing process?
Absolutely. So our fuels are made using renewable electricity to make green hydrogen, to which we add a carbon molecule in the form of carbon capture. And that is then converted into methanol as an intermediate product. And using our proprietary technology, which consists of our advanced catalyst and process design, we then convert the methanol into a drop in gasoline. And, the key part here is that gasoline can be used straight in the car, in the engine, and doesn't have to undergo upgrading in refineries or blending facilities. And also, the overall beauty of this process is that we're agnostic as to where the methanol comes from. So actually, we can also, and we already do, process biomethanol into exactly the same product, which allows us to scale much quicker and utilize currently available biomethanol on the market.
Okay. And so what's the sort of reduction in CO2 emissions from like P1 fuels compared to normal fossil fuels in like
it's
a
massive.
percentage of? Okay. It's that's good.
It's really hard to believe for some people, but our current greenhouse gas reduction is certified at 77.8% over fossil gasoline, which alone is a lot. I mean, we're talking about a similar overall life cycle footprint of a battery electric vehicle. So we're in that range already. But our aim is to reach up to 95% of greenhouse gas reduction.
Okay. And so how do you get from 77% to 95%? What does that sort of evolution look like?
Yeah, so one of the key factors there is really transitioning from solely biomethanol feedstock to the e-methanol feedstock, which is derived from the green hydrogen pathway, as I mentioned earlier. And by doing so and co-locating our production units at the sites where e-methanol is produced or will be produced in the future, we heavily cut down on CO2 emissions within the logistics space, so transporting feedstock from one place to another.
Right. Okay. So is it this sort of feedstock element that's like the hardest part of the manufacturing process? Is in terms of like
the hardest part of the manufacturing process is really developing a fuel that you can use in any car, right? So that's the most challenging thing, and where we really blow the competitors out the water, to be quite honest. And that takes a lot of work, a lot of real life testing and engine time. You really can't replicate the marriage of fuel and engine in a laboratory or on a PowerPoint slide. You really have to put that fuel into as many conditions as possible. So that's where we excel, and I think that was and will continue to be the hardest challenge, the biggest challenge, because we do have to really take into consideration that we currently supply everything from Formula One engines to lawnmowers, right? And each of these internal combustion engines have a slightly different requirement for the fuel. And so that's the most fun and challenging aspect of the work.
Okay. And is that where I suppose a lot of the sort of time, resources, money is being spent? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an R&D space, and it's working closely with car manufacturers, engine engineers, and the whole community at large, actually, to make sure that they're very comfortable with the fuel in any condition, in any application.
Okay. And I understand a lot of the development is being done in the sort of in and around motorsport. Why is that?
Well, I mean, look, some people use motorsports as a marketing platform, right? They put a sticker on a Formula One car, claim that it runs their fuel, which it doesn't really. We actually, growing up in motorsport and most of our team being motorsport fanatics, we actually embrace motorsport for what it is, and that's an advanced technology development platform. And so we've really used this approach from the very beginning, where we work hand in hand with the engine engineers, taking their feedback, reformulate the fuel, change the production process, and really strive to make the fuel work. And that's why we are the official partners of the World Rally Championship, because the FIA was very kind enough or very visionary enough to allow us to actually develop the fuel in the championship. And this is kind of unheard of when you think about official fuel supply in FIA World Championships. Usually you have one product that you have to supply over the course of the contract. And in light of the importance and in light of the fact that the FIA World Rally Championship was the very first ever global championship to switch to a completely fossil-free fuel, we actually were able to incrementally develop the product with the car manufacturers and release new versions of the fuel year over year.
Okay. And is there a particular reason why you've gone World Rally Championship? Is there something about rally that makes it a good proving ground, or is this just kind of your love for rally?
No, it's look, unlike Formula One,
okay.
and don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of Formula One, but unlike Formula One, here you can supply all the competitors. So basically you're the sole supplier. So in Formula One, each competitor has the choice of what fuel they use as long as it meets the specification. In the WRC, you get nominated for your technical merit, pricing, and whatever, and then everyone uses it, which gives you an enormous amount of data and really valuable feedback that you cannot replicate in laboratory conditions. So imagine, us working with the likes of Toyota, Hyundai, Motorsport, Stellantis, and others from conditions such as the deserts in Kenya to the Arctic Circle in northern Sweden, where you operate the cars at minus 30 degrees Celsius. So all of these touch points and all of the feedback and engine testing that we were able to do was fundamentally instrumental in actually getting out a fuel that we're confident performs perfectly well in passenger cars.
Yeah. Okay. And it obviously sounds like you are also involved in other aspects of motorsport as well. Obviously, rally is your sort of partnership, but you are running the other cars. What other areas are you involved in? Is it sort of historic racing? I know they're quite sort of big on these fuels. Is that something that you're doing as well?
Yeah, so we're involved, across a wide range of motorsport applications, starting from grassroots racing, such as the FIA Karting Championship, the Champions of the Future, and other applications where we actually have 6-year-old children starting their careers in motorsport on a fossil-free fuel. Imagine how awesome that is. I
Yeah.
mean, when I was racing, I was battling this negative stigma of polluting the environment, doing
Mm.
something wrong. If you're not in Formula One or some world championship, you're actually just doing it for fun, and it becomes very hard to gain whatever that sponsorship or even like social acceptance. But I was very proud that we started with the karting championship, because everyone who starts their racing career is already doing so in a very environmentally friendly and green way, and is
Yeah.
actually contributing to scaling these technologies to the mass market. So that's one of my favorite championships that we supply. But we also work in a lot of GT racing. We do two-wheel racing, motorcycle racing. Historic racing is definitely one of them. One of our very good customers, Sebastian Vettel, has used the fuel to decarbonize his Formula One cars at historic racing such as Goodwood. So there's quite a few world firsts that we've achieved, including the very first synthetic fuel to be supplied at the Mille Miglia for one
Oh,
iconic
wow.
car manufacturer. So it goes to say how versatile these fuels are, and really what they can mean for global greenhouse gas reduction pathways.
I suppose, will there be a sort of, or will there come a time, hopefully relatively soon, where there is kind of a mass adoption across all forms of motorsport that adopt these fuels? Is that realistic? And when?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, motorsport is one of those, let's say, industries or verticals that has no excuse not to run
Yeah.
sustainable fuels. I mean, quite frankly, either the championships want to be part of the solution of global warming or part of the problem. And I don't mean to be harsh, but if 6-year-old children, run this fuel, so can anyone else.
Yeah. This is quite a technical process, and there are still, a number of challenges to be overcome, I'm sure. I suppose, a lot of talk about the price of the fuels. I think that's come down over the years as the development has improved. But is that, something that will continue to come down, or is price always going to be a bit of a challenge?
It's a good question, a very complex one. So, maybe to start off, we cut the price by half since we started. So the
Right.
cost reduction is real, it's occurring, it's happening. It obviously goes hand in hand with scaling the output of fuel. So we currently sell in the low millions of liters, which obviously is, not enough. It's not comparable to traditional fossil fuel refinery, for example.
Yeah.
But we do have clear sight to reach fossil fuel cost parity sometime in the mid 2030s, and that's what we're striving for.
Okay. And obviously, there are other industries as well that are pushing the development of sustainable fuels. I think aviation is certainly one of them. Is there a sort of the aviation industry is a much bigger industry than the automotive one. Is there a risk that sort of they'll come in and pull resources in their direction, or is there sort of competition in that respect, or is it not quite like that?
Hey Archie, that is a common misconception what you just said.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Correct me on it.
On a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis. So if you let's look at it this way. If you think about the transportation industry, that industry represents about 30% of all greenhouse gas emissions. Now, what's really concerning about the transportation vertical is that it continuously increases CO2 emissions year over year. So it's one of the most important sectors we have to decarbonize. Now, when you deep dive into where's the CO2 coming from, and you look at what constitutes these emissions, it's not aviation. Aviation is about 10% only of all CO2 emissions within that sector. Majority of those CO2 emissions actually come from passenger cars and vans, about almost 50%, 48% according to the EIA. So it is the most important, subsegment of the transportation sector that needs to be decarbonized. And the thing is, up until now, politicians and the general public thought, well, hey, we're going to decarbonize these passenger cars by electrifying them. Which, yeah, it's a great idea. The fact of the matter is that we've learned it's much more challenging than we assumed. We already know that electrification or full electrification within that segment is heavily jeopardized and delayed. And we see that, whether that's consumer preference of people not really wanting to buy EVs if they're not subsidized, or whether we see it on the cost side, on the car manufacturer side, where they're not making money selling the EVs even without the subsidies. So, we really have to look at it from the other way around, where if we want to scale low carbon liquid fuels, we have to take into consideration the automotive segment, period. And especially gasoline, because as I mentioned, it's the hugest one. I mean, take the United States, for example. I think it's 1.2 billion liters that are consumed a day of gasoline. So this is where the CO2 emissions are. And I think, as a society, at one point, we have to come clean and say, hey, we have to be technology agnostic to decarbonize passenger cars. And that's not only electrification. That is, that has to be a whole all other solutions in order to reach those climate targets, including our fossil-free gasoline.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad you pulled me up on that. I suppose, you touched on it a little bit, the EV angle as well as another sort of alternative. And I know hydrogen is sort of in that circle as well. Will these alternatives all sort of co-evolve, or will one sort of become the dominant? Like, do you think sustainable fuel will become like, oh, we've cracked it, like everyone just chuck that in your car, we don't need EVs anymore?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know what the future will bring. But what I believe is that we will need all technology pathways. Okay. So a combination of electrification, of hydrogen, and of synthetic fuels. And I think it will really depend on the country and location and the specific markets where this decarbonization has to happen. So the advantage of our fuel and e-fuels or biofuels in general is that you could utilize the current infrastructure, whether that is the fuel stations, the cars themselves. I mean, there's 1.3 billion internal combustion engines on the road today. So if you really want to decarbonize something quickly and efficiently, it really comes down to changing the fuel. Are electric vehicles important? Absolutely, they are. They do play a pivotal role in reaching our climate targets. But I think one view is what's the best decarbonization strategy, but the second is timing, and that's kind of something we don't really talk about. Where we need to decarbonize now. I mean, if we're to reach our climate targets according to the Paris Climate Agreement and other national greenhouse gas reduction strategies, we only have a limited amount of CO2 budget left. And the more we prolong a technology agnostic approach, the less likely we are to reach our climate targets. So it's going to have to be everything.
Okay. And I suppose what is happening in the political arena? Are you sort of, as a company, presenting to politicians and trying to get them, to look at what you're up to and educate them on what's going on in this space?
Oh,
that says it all, I think.
Well, we tried. We tried. Well, I mean, what I've learned is educating politicians is challenging. It's probably more challenging than the technology required to develop these fuels. So, look, this segment is so heavily politicized and driven by so many subsidies and so many stakeholders that it would be naive to assume that a small startup such as P1 Fuels has any say in this political arena. We've offered the German federal government to use our fuels in their vehicles, in the vehicles that carry around, that drive the various politicians, because they use internal combustion engines, by the way, and they haven't. So the technology is here, the political framework not really, and what we've decided a long time ago at P1 is we're going to strive to make these fuels at fossil fuel cost parity. And then it doesn't really matter what the politicians, say, think, or do, because the fact of the matter is that there are 1.3 billion cars on the road now. They're not going to disappear. Looking at the forecast, at the best electrification adoption rate, we're going to have 1 billion in 2060 still. So, either these cars are going to use fossil fuels if the current political framework will be so fragmented, or a company such as ourselves gets the fuel to cost the same as fossil fuel, and they're just going to use that, right? So I think that's how we're trying to navigate this space. And, you see a lot of incentive for the uptake of sustainable aviation fuel. You don't see much for automotive fuel. So I think our time is better spent developing the product, working with our customers, and making sure that we get this into as many engines as we can.
Yeah. Okay. And so, for the people that are listening to this that are, potentially own like a classic car and are very, strong advocates for the internal combustion engine, what does this mean for them? Can they buy the fuel? Can you run it already in a normal sort of,
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
we have fuels that meet the European road fuel standard, the EN228. You can purchase these through the P1 distribution network, or you could just send us an email and we send you a drum.
Okay. Yeah.
Clearly, part of the cost of our fuel and why it's higher than fossil fuels is the fact that we sell our fuels currently in drums, right? So that is inefficient to really to decrease the cost. But if there is someone who wants to run the fuel, we have it in stock, and people can go ahead and buy it.
Okay, and there's no, I think you touched on it already, but there's no alterations required to the cars to run these fuels. You don't need to change the fuel lines or anything like that.
None. It works. It works perfectly. We have a lot of proof points. We have quite iconic people stating that. Whether those are some of the car manufacturers themselves, whether those are white papers that we publish with various universities, or whether those are early adopters such as Sebastian Vettel. We've proven it works. So they don't have to fear in putting it into their ICs. I mean, that is my personal guarantee to the petrol heads out there.
Yeah. Okay. And what is the octane rating of the fuel? Is it just the same as sort of
Yeah. So our most sold fuel is 98 RON.
Okay.
So it's basically the high octane pump fuel.
Octane,
We also have specific variations for some applications which are higher RON. But for your, daily driver, we have the 98 RON pump fuel.
Okay. And I know this is probably an impossible question, but, how long until I can drive down to my local petrol station and put this fuel from the pump into my car?
Well, we are planning something quite special. I don't want to necessarily mention it now, but I think it will be sooner than you think.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. That's a nice sort of note to sort of transition into some quick fire. But no, that's very encouraging. So thank you for the insights, Martin. But yeah, I did want to sort of finish up by asking you some quick fire questions. They're a little bit more lighthearted and not hopefully so intense. But I suppose rally stage or racetrack.
Rally stage.
That was good.
That's an easy one.
Yeah, that was. Modern or classic cars?
Classic.
Okay. Who's your racing hero?
Ayrton Senna.
Oh, okay.
That's a very common one. I bet you get.
No, it is. That's. I wasn't sure if I was going to get a rally driver, but Ayrton can probably.
Well, if you want a rally driver, it would be Michel Mouton.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. Brilliant. And what's in your dream 3-car garage?
Well, clearly it's the Lancia Delta Integrale. That's one that I must have eventually. It's a Ferrari F40, just because I grew up with that car. I mean, I didn't have it, but it was on my poster. I was completely obsessed with it as a kid. And then a 911 GT3.
Oh, I think that's my favorite one we've had to date. That's literally that's pretty similar to what mine would look like as well. That's, yeah. God, that's fantastic. What a garage that is. Yeah. Well, Martin, thank you.
A hypothetical one.
Yeah. For now, yeah. Me too. Well, thank you so much for your time, Martin. Where can sort of people find out a bit more about P1 Fuels? You got a website, Instagram. What's the deal there?
Yeah, the easiest way is to find us on Instagram or www.p1fuels.com.
Okay, fantastic. I'll leave all the links down in the show notes so people can find those. And yeah, if you're listening to this and you want to check out Custodian as well, you can do so at www.custodian.club. We've also just launched insurance design for enthusiasts, so yeah, go and check that out. And make sure to like the vid and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you in the next one. Martin, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Archie.